Nobody dished out awkward truths quite like Freud. He claimed that throughout the course of history, humanity has had to endure from the hands of science three great outrages upon its naive self-love. These are the discovery that the world is not the centre of the celestial spheres, but rather a speck in the vast universe. The discovery that we were not specially created, but instead descend from animals. And the discovery that our conscious mind does not control how we act, but merely tells us a story about our actions. It's this third great outrage that I think most people still have trouble swallowing today. And that makes it ideal wiggle soup material. The idea that our minds tell us stories, building a set and stage for us to perform on, is not new. Things happen, and our minds tell us what's going on. Ask the question why, and our minds are let off the leash, often producing some of the most contrived and fanciful fiction it's possible to get away with. This ad hoc narrative in our heads gives us two practical definitions of reality. The world as it exists objectively, without human input, and the world as we experience it, as flawed biological machines. The latter is what interests us here, the stories we tell ourselves, in particular, to make sense of who we are. What issues are worth discussing? How should the country be run? Who's the sexiest pop star of all time? Our answers to these questions tell us what we already know. That two people, given the same information, can hold vastly different opinions. The reason that we can hold divergent, often conflicting points of view comes down to the unique way our brains process information. As the world comes tumbling in through the senses, we have to look for patterns in the data. Patterns are what give the world meaning. It's in this pattern detection that every one of us falls victim to an inescapable army of personal prejudices and biases. They flavour our reality in every moment, bubbling up from the depths of our past experiences, looming through the mists of our future expectations. And they serve us well. Our prejudices and biases are there to plug gaps in worldly knowledge. It's far easier to join the dots than to draw a picture from scratch. However, to prevent our internal narratives getting too out of hand, we must accept how impoverished the totality of our life experience has been. Say you see someone dressed in green overalls, splashed with blood. Their gloved hands hold deadly weapons. A mask hides their face. The dead body in front of them is perhaps the third, possibly the fourth they've killed this week. To you, there's no cause for alarm. This person is clearly a surgeon, not a sadistic mass murderer, and definitely not an insurance salesman going above and beyond to prove his point. The difference appears obvious thanks to the context provided by your cumulative life experience. If you were from another culture, another time, or another planet, there would be nothing obvious about this scene at all. The story you'd tell yourself to make sense of things could be very different. An alien visitor might, rationally, assume that the person in green was engaged in some kind of mating ritual, or an elaborate mode of communication. The plausibility of these interpretations would depend entirely on the biases our alien friend had brought with them. Similarly, if we travelled to an alien planet to observe an alien culture ourselves, anything we tried to infer about their customs and behaviours would have to be based on comparisons with our life here on Earth. There's no escaping that very limited frame of reference. We could never presume to understand what motivates each individual alien, what issues they as a whole consider worthy of discussion, or which celebrity extraterrestrial they'd most like to copulate with. Humbled, we should accept that any naive assumptions we could make regarding the practices and mentalities of alien civilizations should also apply to different epochs here on Earth. Even if there are similarities between two cultures or time periods, we must critically assess what prejudices and biases we hold before claiming to know anything about these other people. Every sentient creature embodies a unique collection of highly subjective life experiences. No two existences are quite the same. Yet, as social animals, humans are condemned to interact with and interpret each other as best we can. It just so happens that identifying patterns in the behavior of others is what we're all programmed to do from birth. As Stephen West, creator of the podcast Philosophize This, has pointed out, being born is a lot like being shipped off to an alien planet. On this planet, you're entrusted to a pair of untrained mentors at random. If anything, they might have been selected because they happen to look a little bit like you. From the moment you arrive, you belong to an arbitrary tribe with whom you cannot communicate, and are utterly dependent on your mentors to survive. There is no way you could possibly have any idea what was going on, let alone conjure any reasonable opinions about the way things ought to be done. So what's the best thing to do in this situation? There's only one thing you can do. Copy everyone else. Primary rule of integrating with an alien society, in case you were wondering, is to just go along with things as they appear. Accept what you are taught and mimic all those around you. There's just too much to figure out on your own. Whilst all of this may be sage advice, it introduces an interesting problem. A lot of what gets passed down to you is completely fabricated. This happens because, just like you, your two mentors had to go through the same ordeal themselves, copying what they were taught as best they could. And guess what? At some point, you too will be given an alien import of your own. From that day, it will fall to you to pass along all the knowledge you have acquired, filling in any embarrassing blanks with plausible ad hoc padding. Because systemic misinterpretations and bad habits get handed down through the generations, our understanding of the world around us can always be revised. Some people are more open to this than others, but in any case, our individual interpretive ability is what creates our reality. Our lives are indeed a unique tapestry, coloured by fleeting emotional states, shaped by the imperfect strategies we've used to make sense of everything. As humans, nothing is more important to us than this natural ability. Personally, I find it strangely comforting to realise how limited my own lens of perception is, how subjective the sum total of my life experiences has been, and how flawed this must make my ability to judge the world at face value. It's a jungle out there, and my subjective cognitive machete may be just as useful as anyone else's. The rugged path we hack towards truth applies to introspection too. Who are you? One thing we all tell ourselves is that we're certain of who we are, deep down. It can be very useful to adapt our behaviour to a situation, just for convenience. There is a subtle practicality in acting differently towards your closest friends compared to, say, potential clients. But when we make reference to ourselves, we intuitively feel that nobody else knows us better than we do. How could they? Only you possess the unrestricted access to all your thoughts and desires. Well, not so fast. What Freud referred to as a story about our actions reveals this inner self to be a handy fiction too. There are two ways of answering the question, who are you? The most common is the easiest. Reduce this uncomfortably vague question into a few simple statements. My name is Warren. I'm 38 years old, ostensibly human. I enjoy travel, music, science, philosophy, etc. While statements like this can be demonstrably true or false, any labels we use to define ourselves only describe us as we exist in the world at this moment. Usually, this is all that polite small talk requires of us. But such easy answers inevitably fall short of capturing exactly who it is we really are. A full description must account for how we got here and what we might go on to do next. To really understand who a person is and who you are, we must allow for future potential. What I could realistically achieve with my life is a crucial part of how I see myself. It's a big part of what it means to be me. The second, more in-depth way of answering the "who are you" question attempts to capture our inherent ability to change. Who we are at this moment actually rests on who we have the potential to become in the future, and vice versa. The choices we make and the possibilities we bring about are just as integral as the hard facts of our existence when it comes to knowing who a person is. A deeper understanding can be achieved by considering ourselves today in combination with the control we have over the life we are currently living. And control, here, is key. The facts of our existence limit our future potential. They reduce our power to change. Very few people can be both a successful sumo wrestler and a gymnast. Paths we cleave through life's jungle negate various alternatives. If I bulk up to wrestle an opponent out of the ring, I may not perform quite as gracefully on the parallel bars. Facts about who I am today limit my options for tomorrow and curb the freedom I have to sculpt my future. It's been said before, freedom is always freedom within limits. However, it's often these specific limitations that make a person so interesting. A human life, like a piece of art, amounts to what has been created or achieved within specified parameters. Despite what old-school Disney might tell you, the hard facts of your birth are always going to affect the options at your disposal and what you can hope to achieve. As our dreams and reality often pull in different directions, most people are faced with a conflict. Either they ignore their potential and accept that they are complete and unchanging, like Woody from Toy Story, or they deny the unfortunate facts of their existence and set about chasing unrealistic dreams, like Buzz. The Woody gang are by far the largest. As we can't know the future, it's often tempting to simplify our existence by ignoring any avenues of self-improvement. We hide from the terrifying responsibility of choosing between possible futures by telling ourselves stories, reducing our lives to a string of facts. It's far easier to play a role, conform to a stereotype and fulfill the likely expectations of other people, and view ourselves in purely factual terms. In this view, who I am is the sum total of everything I've already done with my life. Just as a story requires a reader, it's impossible to get a full picture of who we are without considering what other people make of us. This "other people make of us" metaphor rings surprisingly literal. As the philosopher Alain de Botton sees it, we may seek a fortune for no greater reason than to secure the respect and attention of people who would otherwise look straight through us. Another vital part of what it is to be you, then, involves existing with other people. Every aspect of who we are, what we've done and what we could do yet, involves a bagatelle of social interactions. It's difficult to think of what someone's potential could look like in isolation. To someone stranded on a desert island, the question becomes practically meaningless. But, to come full circle, these other people have a tendency to make knee-jerk assessments of us based on their own ingrained prejudices and biases. Other people, possibly for convenience sake, don't take time to hear our stories or consider our full potential. They are often more than happy to fill in the blanks themselves. When we open up and share our true selves with a close friend or someone we trust, we're reinforcing a narrative told from an extremely self-interested perspective. Why do we feel a connection to this person? Why do we trust them? It might just be that we choose our friends based on nothing more than who best conforms to our introspective biases. The simple, tidy stories we tell ourselves, the ones our friends lend credence to, might be reassuring. They might even make the world seem less intimidating and unknowable. But this is a slippery slope. As children, we accept the world as it is and go with the flow. As adults, the criterion on which we select our friends is based on how well they reinforce the myths we're convinced of. That's why we like these people. That's why their opinion of us feels so validating. If you think of me the way I think of me, we're likely to become friends. To escape this seductive trap, we only need to consider Woody's message. That the truest measure of who you are involves things you've actually done, and not how you regard yourself. Asking someone who they are either invokes quick, easy, superficial answers, or draws on important but admittedly unknowable future speculation. Next time you want to get acquainted with somebody new, beyond fleeting pleasantries, instead of asking who they are, try asking, what's your story? Whether a person voices it or not, this question invites a deeper self-reflection, embracing an autobiographical self in a process of continual change. Thanks for listening to this first attempt to turn my Wiggle Soup blog into a listenable podcast. Don't expect any answers here, just, I hope, some interesting stuff to think about. Next we'll cover teleportation, reproductive biology, and the chicken and egg problem. Why do I do this to myself?